I can still remember the way the steering wheel felt under my palms the first time I sat in my dream car. The smooth grip of the leather, the faint scent of new upholstery, the way the engine purred when I turned the key. It wasn't just a machine to me, it was everything I had poured myself into for years. Every late-night shift at the diner, every odd job I picked up on weekends, every time I said no to hanging out with friends so I could save just a little more, it all came together in that one moment when the car was finally mine. I didn't just buy it. I earned it with grit, sweat, and discipline. To anyone else, it might have just looked like a car parked in the driveway. But to me, it was proof that no dream was too far as long as I was willing to work for it. It was the kind of car I used to pin pictures of on my wall as a teenager, promising myself that someday, somehow, I would have it. And against every doubt, every whispered comment that I was just a kid dreaming too big, I made it happen. The pride that filled me when I slid behind the wheel was something no one could ever take away, or so I thought. I remember the way my chest swelled with a sense of arrival each time I turned the ignition and heard the engine roar to life. Driving it wasn't just about going from point A to B, it was about feeling unstoppable, like I had carved out a place in the world that belonged entirely to me. People would stare at stoplights, some in admiration, some in envy, and while I never bought it for anyone else's approval, I couldn't deny how good it felt. This wasn't handed down to me, wasn't gifted, it was mine because I had fought for it. And for someone who had always felt like their efforts went unnoticed, that meant more than words could ever capture. But one morning, I walked outside and the driveway was empty. At first, I thought maybe I had parked on the street the night before, or that maybe I was forgetting something simple. But after pacing back and forth, checking every corner, reality hit me like a punch to the stomach. My car was gone. My pulse raced. My mind spun through possibilities, and for a moment I honestly thought it had been stolen. I was already reaching for my phone to call the police when my parents sat me down in the living room with expressions that didn't match the gravity of what had just happened. They looked almost casual, as though this wasn't life-shattering news. When they told me, I couldn't breathe. They had sold my car. The car I worked years for, sacrificed for, dreamed about. And worse, it wasn't because they needed the money, not because there was some emergency or a life-or-death situation. They did it for my sister. She had been in another one of her financial disasters, drowning in overdue bills, credit cards maxed out, spending more than she ever earned. And instead of holding her accountable, they decided the solution was to cash in my dream. It was for the greater good, they said. She needed it more. As if all my sweat and sacrifice could just be erased because someone else was careless. As if my years of saying no, of working twice as hard, meant less than her impulse shopping and reckless choices. They looked at me like I should understand, like family loyalty demanded I swallow this without protest. But inside me, something broke. The betrayal wasn't just that my car was gone, it was that my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, chose her mistakes over my hard work. They treated my dream like it was negotiable, disposable, like it was just an object to trade away. And as my sister smirked in the corner, already making excuses about how she'd get back on her feet soon, I realized that to them, my effort had never mattered as much as her comfort. For days, I walked around like a ghost, anger and heartbreak tangled so tightly inside me that I didn't know which one was heavier. Every time I saw the empty spot in the driveway, it felt like someone had carved a hole in my chest. Friends asked me what happened, and I couldn't even bring myself to explain. It was too humiliating to admit that my own parents had done this to me. I kept replaying every moment I had saved for that car, every double shift, every time I said no to myself, so I could say yes to the dream. And now it was gone, handed over to someone who didn't even know the meaning of sacrifice. At night, lying awake in the dark, I wanted to scream. My sister was out there spending without a thought, while I was left with nothing but the echo of betrayal. But as much as I wanted to stay in that anger, another part of me whispered something different. I realized that being furious alone wasn't going to give me back my car, and it definitely wasn't going to teach my sister or my parents anything. I could either stay broken, or I could make sure this injustice didn't end here. That was the turning point. Quietly, without announcing it, I made a decision. If my parents weren't going to hold her accountable, I would. I started keeping track of every dollar my car had been worth, of every cent she borrowed, of every excuse she made. I wrote it all down, neat and organized, a running tally of the debt she owed me. It gave me focus, gave me something to hold on to when bitterness threatened to consume me. I didn't tell her right away. I let her think I had swallowed it, let her live in that smug belief that she had gotten away with it. But inside, I was building a case, gathering every detail, every ounce of leverage I'd need for the moment when I finally turned the tables. And with every entry in my notebook, I felt the fire inside me shift, from wild rage to steady, unshakable determination. I picked a night when the house was quiet, and the dishes still smelled faintly of lemon, and I laid my notebook on the kitchen table like evidence. The lamp threw a thin pool of light over the pages, rows of numbers, dates, little notes about calls and excuses. My parents watched from the doorway with that same misplaced calm, as if this could still be rearranged into something polite. My sister sat across from me, scrolling through her phone, the sound of her thumb on the screen a small, annoying metronome. I put the pen down and looked at her. "You're going to pay me back," I said. No theatrics. No pleading. Just facts. Every cent. She laughed at first, and it felt like salt in a wound. "Like hell I will," she said, but there was a tremor in her voice I'd never heard before, an unsteady edge that told me she knew I meant it. I slid the first sheet toward her. The sale price, the bank transfer, the interest I'd calculated for the months I'd been robbed of my dream. I'd even added the small indignities, the time I'd fixed the dent on my own, the tire I'd paid for after a pothole took it, because this wasn't just money to me. It was a ledger of dignity. I set deadlines. Not because I wanted to punish, but because I needed structure. She had always lived on the soft gravity of other people's rescues. I wasn't going to be another Orbit. No more bailouts. No more casual loans. I told my parents plainly, I would help her rebuild, on one condition. She'd have to prove she could be accountable. Receipts. Work logs. Proof of income. If she couldn't meet the targets, I'd cut off the little conveniences she took for granted. The phone plan, the borrowed car, the rent checks. For the first time, my parents' faces flickered with unease. They saw the math, and it was hard to arrange love around a spreadsheet. The first payment came like a small miracle. $30 slid across the table, folded and creased. She apologized and called it symbolic. I accepted it without smiling. It wasn't about the money, it was about the precedent. Then came the humiliations, her having to hustle a second job, her pride crumpling into polite barista shifts and night deliveries. I sat through the bad moods, the slammed doors, the nights when she begged me to stop counting, to let things go. Every time she offered a promise without proof, I turned away. Promises without receipts were worthless to me now. There were moments when I almost relented, when I saw her exhausted at dawn, eyes like someone who'd finally realized the cost of continued entitlement, but I didn't. The harder I was, the faster she changed. Dollar by dollar, the ledger filled the way a tide fills a dry bay, slow and relentless. My parents tried to soften the edges, sneaking her help here and there when they thought I wasn't watching. I caught them, and I told them plainly that enabling her comfort had been the problem all along. It stung them to hear it, but it also made them look at their choices, as if for the first time. When she handed me the last receipt, a battered envelope with a final bank slip folded inside, I felt a type of victory I hadn't expected. It wasn't loud. There were no celebratory horns, only the small clack of our kitchen clock and the rustle of paper. She looked at me then, not with the old smirk, not with entitlement, but with a quiet, awkward gratitude. It wasn't complete forgiveness. None of this erased the betrayal, but it was accountability, and accountability is a beginning I can live with. When that final dollar was returned, I sat there staring at the crumpled bills and the thin slip of paper like they carried the weight of years. For so long, I had imagined the moment I'd reclaim what was taken from me, but when it arrived, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about standing in the ruins of betrayal and realizing I had rebuilt something stronger inside myself. My parents were quiet, their usual voices muted with a kind of shame they couldn't cover up. They had watched me fight tooth and nail to earn that car, and then they had watched me lose it, not to fate, not to bad luck, but to their decision. Now, with the proof of repayment sitting on the table, they finally understood what it meant to take from someone who had sacrificed everything to build something for themselves. Regret hung heavy in the room. I saw it in the way my mother's hands twisted in her lap, in the way my father avoided my eyes. They realized too late that they had underestimated me, that they had thought I'd bend the way I always had, swallowing the injustice for the sake of family harmony.
But I didn't bend this time.
I made sure my sister carried the burden of her choices, and by the end, even she admitted she had never truly learned responsibility until I forced her to face it. My parents saw that enabling her had done nothing but breed entitlement, while stripping me of something irreplaceable. I didn't rush out to replace the car. That wasn't the point anymore. What mattered was that I had proven to myself that my worth couldn't be stolen or traded away, that I could draw a line and hold it, no matter how much it made others uncomfortable. And while my parents regret the choice they made, while they sometimes try to offer apologies wrapped in awkward silences or small gestures, I don't need them to say the words. Their regret is visible enough. What I need, and what I've claimed, is the knowledge that my dreams are mine alone, and I will never again let anyone treat them as expendable.